Okay, the next item of business is a debate on motion 17785 in the name of Kate Forbes on empowering entrepreneurs and innovators. I would invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on the Deputy First Minister to speak to and move the motion. Around 11 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Entrepreneurs and innovators are the catalysts of growth that shape our economy. From the moment I first entered government, I have championed that agenda. I believe in a future where Scotland reclaims its position as a global leader in innovation, where entrepreneurs don't just imagine a better Scotland, but have the tools, the support and the investment necessary to build it. Scaling firms have a profound economic impact and significantly outperform the broader economy. They are 40% more productive than standard SMEs and corporates. They pay higher wages and they are responsible for the majority of net job creation. And remarkably, despite accounting for less than 1% of UK businesses, they contribute more than 50% of total SME turnover, amounting to £1.2 trillion. And in Scotland, I'm proud to say that the value of our start-up community goes beyond what can be measured by hard economic analysis. Because many of our most promising and imaginative companies are working on problems of global significance: the climate crisis, food security, drug discovery. Firms that dispel the myth that growth and well-being are contradictory economic principles. Yep, you don't look like Sharon Dowie, but I will take that.
Do I need to change for this? The presiding officer?
Either
Craig Hoy.
Can I simply self-declare?
I'm relaxed as to whether it's Sharon Dowie or Craig Hoy that intervene.
Let's go with Craig Hoy.
I think we've corrected the record. I've slightly lost my train of thought there, but the Minister is talking about young and ambitious entrepreneurs who are global in their mindset. Would you advise a young, ambitious, globally minded entrepreneur to base themselves on one of Scotland's islands at the moment?
Deputy First Minister.
Absolutely, as a representative of Scotland's islands, I think is what he mentioned, absolutely would recommend that. And there are a number of brilliant start-ups located in our islands currently, and I can speak from experience about some of those brilliant businesses that are located in Scotland's islands. Despite the global economic headwinds that have challenged our economy, there are clear signs that Scotland's strategy is beginning to pay off. Over the last 4 years, we've worked closely with key figures in the private sector, like Mark Logan and Anna Stewart, to execute a detailed plan to achieve that aim. Last year, Scotland's risk capital market bucked UK-wide trends, with Scottish firms raising over £700 million in funding, a 19% increase in the previous year, and a sharp contrast to a 14% decline across the rest of the UK. There's also an increasing volume of companies raising capital at a level which suggests they have the potential to achieve substantial scale. In 2024, there were 17 investments exceeding £10 million, worth a total of £373 million, up 90% in deal volume and 70% in value. And I say that at the outset because some of these debates often get quite negative from the opposition, but can we at least collaborate and join forces in congratulating Scotland's start-up community for what they have achieved in those figures? Daniel Johnson.
Daniel Johnson.
I'm very grateful, and I agree we should champion success, but actually to truly succeed we also need to acknowledge issues. So while she quotes those figures, we also know that the value of Scottish deals at 10 million above actually fell by 69% in 2022 to 23. And likewise, we know other measures such as the number of patents has been falling. So do you not need to recognise the whole picture, not just the bits that show the success? We also need to show the weaknesses as well.
It's precisely because we confronted some of the challenges 4 years ago that we have embarked on this journey to support Scottish entrepreneurs. And the fact that the risk capital market has bucked UK-wide trends, whilst we've seen a decline across the UK, we've seen an increase in Scotland, I think is remarkable. And it's because of the quality of the businesses. A standout example is Edinburgh-based gaming firm Build a Rocket Boy, which raised over £86 million in a single investment round. It already employs 450 people with further growth expected. And just yesterday, Wordsmith.ai, a TechScaler member, announced a $25 million Series A investment, achieving a $100 million valuation in a record-breaking 18 months. Those are remarkable success stories. And there are strong... I will, particularly if it's to congratulate those businesses.
Murdo Fraser.
Well, I'm very pleased to congratulate those businesses. But as she's talking about investment and attracting investment, I wonder if she's going to come on and talk about public sector investment, because one of the most innovative sectors in the Scottish economy is defence, a sector which employs tens of thousands of people and is growing. So when is the Scottish Government going to revisit its short-sighted policy not to invest public funds in the fast-growing defence sector?
Deputy First Minister.
The member intentionally or otherwise distorts the Scottish Government's position. The Scottish Government has a long-standing position of not using public money for munitions. But just a matter of months ago, I announced £2 million. Just a minute. I announced £2 million of investment in the skills and training that is required. And we've also invested in defence companies around diversification. And he wants any evidence of that, I refer him to previous debates in this Parliament that have accused us of making those investments in defence. So both sides can't be right. There are straws in the wind to suggest that this momentum will continue to build. TechScaler is where we incubate and grow Scotland's most promising start-ups, and it is performing beyond expectations. Since launch, members have raised £118 million, and there is strong demand for services, and membership applications are accelerating. That suggests a stronger pipeline of high-growth founders than we had anticipated at the early stage. So if we're going to be proven wrong, at least we're proven wrong on the basis of under-expectations rather than over-expecting. This, in turn, is attracting the involvement of new investors and scaling firms. Elsewhere, data from RSM Consulting shows that Scotland is the UK's fastest-growing territory for the incorporation of new tech businesses. The same figures showed incorporations in London falling by 6%. I mean, I love a good debate, but I would like to finish my speech as well, but I will take this one.
I'm very grateful, and I'll be very quick. It's just whether the government thinks that the current rates regime, the way the rates regime is structured, mitigates against small businesses scaling up.
Deputy First Minister.
No, because of the small business bonus scheme, which remains the most generous across the United Kingdom. But the point that he does make, which actually I would agree with him on, is the fact that the rate system, and this is something I've discussed with Daniel Johnson in the past as well, that actually the rates system doesn't often take into account that sometimes the most profitable businesses are the smaller ones. So you can launch a start-up from a cupboard where there are no rates. Meanwhile, a larger business that is perhaps less profitable is paying rates. So I don't think the members are necessarily listening to me, but he may have found a point of consensus there in terms of agreement on those points. So the rate system is based on an older version of the economy where size of property is linked to profitability, and that's not the case in our new tech-driven environment. So he's looking quizzical. I think he does agree with that point because I was giving him a little bit of ground there in terms of his question. While it's right that we should celebrate these successes, we acknowledge that there's more to do if we are to match the performance of our best competitors. And that's why the budget made provision for a record investment of £30 million to accelerate Scotland's emergence as a leading start-up nation. And I'll take this opportunity to highlight to the Chamber some of the key programmes that this funding will support. I'll begin with the implementation of Pathways, Anna Stewart and Mark Logan's groundbreaking review of how we can support more women to start and scale businesses. Women remain significantly underrepresented in entrepreneurship. Alarmingly, only 3.7% of Scottish companies have an all-female founding team, and start-ups founded by women receive just 2% of total investment capital. It's clear that deep-rooted societal barriers continue to limit women's full and equal participation. Pathways correctly describes that as, and I quote, a denial of opportunity on, literally, an industrial scale. We have a duty to meet those challenges head-on. So under the leadership of Anna Stewart, our newly appointed Chief Entrepreneur, we will invest up to £6 million in the report's key recommendations, with a particular focus on pre-start support and associated early-stage grant schemes. That will be a powerful package of interventions, creating best-in-class programmes to help women start and scale businesses, offering targeted financial incentives to back the most promising ideas, and ensuring that support is delivered flexibly in ways and at times that work best for women. Our universities are another source of untapped entrepreneurial potential. They are among Scotland's greatest national assets, hubs of innovation, creativity, enterprise. But despite their global reputation, we've yet to unlock their full economic potential. Sweden offers a compelling example. By placing universities at the heart of its economic model and investing heavily in research and development, it now ranks second in the Global Innovation Index and leads in generating university spin-outs. Scotland needs to be just as ambitious, and that's why we're working closely with our universities to develop a new support package, one that will transform our ability to take innovative ideas from the lab bench to the business world by de-risking new technologies, accelerating commercialisation and attracting follow-on investment. Do we have some time in hand?
Give the time back,
Yeah.
Deputy First Minister. Stephen Kerr.
As ever, I think the Deputy First Minister talks a really good game. And when she talks about universities, does she not accept that the current funding model is failing? Our university sector is in crisis. So to talk this thing up as if none of this other stuff exists is a detachment from reality, and that surely isn't the hallmark of the Deputy First Minister.
Deputy First Minister.
So the points I'm making just now is that we have great research and development. I think we'd all accept that there's some brilliant research and development. He raises questions around funding models, and obviously there's extensive debate about that at the moment. But what we're specifically talking about is the fact that a lot of that research and development doesn't get commercialised. So how do we take it from the point of academic research to turn it into business? And that is what Sweden does well. So there is, yes, a time and a place for a broader conversation about funding models, but what we're talking about is that over the last few years, the commercialisation of that research has lagged behind. The entrepreneurial spirit and enduring legacy of innovation extends far beyond our university campuses. Take John Walker, for example. Humble beginnings on Kilmarnock High Street in the 1800s, he built what would become the globally renowned Johnnie Walker whisky brand, now valued at over $10 billion. So to create the next generation of Johnnie Walkers, we'll invest in igniting entrepreneurial dynamism across all our people and communities. First, we relaunch the £700,000 Ecosystem Fund. Second, we will continue to back Scottish Edge's outstanding work to identify and support promising new businesses. Third, entrepreneurship is often seen as the domain of rare individuals with exceptional intelligence or drive. That's simply not true. Research shows that quality entrepreneurial education and strong networks consistently build the mindset, the skills and the attitudes needed to succeed. And that's why I'm pleased to announce that this year we will relaunch the Competitive Entrepreneurial Education Fund with a focus on embedding project-based entrepreneurial learning in schools across Scotland. And finally, we are supporting a 2-year pilot with Aberdeen University, providing £141,000 to train new computing science teachers, equipping young people with the skills vital for success in high-growth startups. As the effect of our interventions across infrastructure, education and investment start to yield momentum, our ambition is to establish Scotland as a global hub for start-up founders and investors, akin to the reputation presently enjoyed by Sweden and Finland. TechScaler and key policy documents like the Logan Review, Pathways, the Innovation Strategy have raised our profile. TechScaler have been invited to showcase Scottish start-ups in Singapore, in Silicon Valley, in Helsinki, in London, in China and in Japan. And so as we start this debate, where there will be the inevitable political points and there's a role there absolutely for constructive challenge, I think we should also take the opportunity to congratulate what has been achieved in the Scottish start-up scene, and particularly those businesses that are driving that are raising Scotland's profile and are doing us proud on a global scale. This September, Scotland has been selected to host the prestigious DICE conference, welcoming senior executives from more than 100 of the world's top gaming companies. The world is beginning to perceive Scotland differently. It's an impression that we're keen to reinforce, and I hope to work on a cross-party basis to continue to build on that work. Thank you, and I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. I now call on Murdo Fraser to speak to and move Amendment 17785.3. Around 7 minutes. Mr Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start by very much welcoming the fact we're having another debate on the economy, because we now have something of a trend on the economy debates, and that is very welcome. Something of a departure from previously, when we would go long periods in this chamber without discussing Scotland's economic performance, but it's a good change from the government, and today's focus on entrepreneurship and innovation is very welcome. So, delighted to be here. But before I come to what needs to be done, I want to start by looking at this government's track record, given it's been in power in Scotland now for some 18 years. And the fact is, throughout that period, Scotland's rate of business start-up has consistently lagged behind the UK as a whole. According to the latest figures from 2024, Scotland has a business stock of 762 businesses per 10,000 adults. 762. The UK average is 996, so we are lagging far behind. And that gap is particularly stark amongst the smallest businesses, where the figure is 738 per 10,000 for the UK, but just 544 for Scotland. So clearly we have a systemic issue with a lower level of private sector business activity compared to the UK average. Now, according to last year's Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Scotland report, Scotland's total early-stage entrepreneurial activity, known as the TEA rate, was the lowest of the UK nations in 2023. The overall TEA rate for the UK was 10.7, Scotland's was 9.1, Wales has a rate of 11.5, doing very well, England 10.1 and Northern Ireland 9.7. So in all these measures, Scotland lags behind. So we welcome any initiatives to try and improve the rate of entrepreneurship and the rate of business start-up to at least try and match the levels we see elsewhere in the United Kingdom. And we know that there are particular sectors of society where we have issues in trying to encourage people to set up a business, particularly women and ethnic minority groups, as indeed the Deputy First Minister acknowledged. And I would like to pay tribute to the work done by Women's Enterprise Scotland in particular, in terms of the support that they offer, particularly around mentoring and the promotion of role models for women who wish to set up and be involved in business. Now, if the Scottish Government wants to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation, I think a really good starting point would be to listen to entrepreneurs. And Scotland has no more high-profile example of a successful entrepreneur than Sir Tom Hunter. And if the Cabinet Secretary hasn't read the report published by the Hunter Foundation just a few weeks ago, looking at how that might be done, I would encourage her to do so. Because the Hunter Foundation and Oxford Economic together highlight the success of Singapore, a small economy with few natural resources, many ways much less privileged position than Scotland is, as one from which we could learn lessons. Singapore is a country with a strong innovation ecosystem, significant investment in education and lifelong learning to help build a skilled and employable workforce, and with a long-term strategy. Yes, I'll take an intervention.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you to my colleague Murdo Fraser for taking the intervention. Last night I was at Daniel Johnson's sponsored event with the CBI, and many people were talking about the Flexible Workforce Development Fund, which is delivered through colleges, which doesn't have any funding for the previous financial years, and I think it's become a real problem, and that those digital skills gaps are becoming evident, which reflects the conversation within the Tom Hunter's Foundation. Does the member agree that we should reinstate that funding?
Murdo Fraser, I can give you the time back.
Thank you. Thank you. I thank my colleague for that intervention. I absolutely agree with her around that funding programme, which the Economy and Fair Work Committee, which both Mr Johnson and myself sit on, heard a lot of evidence was of great value to business. And I had intended to be at Mr Johnson's event last night, the CBI Scotland reception, but the event I was at previously overran, and therefore I was not able to make it. So I apologise to him for that. But I want to go back to the Hunter Foundation report, because what this highlights is the importance of pro-business policies, the need to provide stable governance, a transparent legal system, low red tape and low taxation. And this is not rocket science, but these are the measures that would help provide the focus on long-term growth that Scotland needs. Sir Tom Hunter has said this: The status quo is completely unacceptable. Change needs to come, and it needs to be radical. Tinkering will only yield further decline. The most important lever available to incentivise entrepreneurs and business is tax. Neither the Scotland or UK governments have chosen to use these levers to their full potential. Now, I agree with Sir Tom Hunter in terms of what he says about the UK Labour government, and especially the ruinous decision they took to increase employer national insurance, a literal tax on jobs which will damage economic growth. But issues around tax are also under the control of this Scottish Government. And the differential rates of income tax, together with the higher rates of LBTT, are undoubtedly causing problems for business who want to recruit above-average earners. And I find it really interesting, when talking to people in the business community and in sectors like finance, that whilst higher income tax continue to be an issue, increasingly they talk about the higher levels of LBTT for those wishing to purchase larger homes as being a real and significant problem in terms of the attractiveness of Scotland for those in that category who are higher earners, and that affects the mobility of labour. And we know, Presiding Officer, from last week's report from the Fiscal Commission that these higher tax rates are not actually delivering. According to the SFC, the income tax hikes implemented by the SNP should be raising a net sum of £1.674 billion for the Scottish Government. But the actual projected income tax net position, compared to what it should have been or would have been prior to the devolution of income tax, is just £616 million. That leaves an astonishing £1 billion gap between what Scotland's higher income tax might have added to the Scottish budget and what they're actually projected to deliver. This is what the SFC referred to as the economic performance gap, made up of slower aggregate earnings and employment growth in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK, alongside the effects of Scottish and UK policies and taxpayer behaviour. If I have time, I'll
give the time.
Yeah, I'll give way.
Minister,
please.
I thank the member for giving way. In terms of Scotland being an attractive nation for others to invest in or move to, I also speak to many companies in Scotland, particularly in high-growth sectors like the space sector or fintech or life sciences, as well as our universities, who tell me the biggest concerns that they have at the moment relate to issues such as the message the UK is sending out to people not being welcome to come to the UK, and also a tax on foreign students who want to study in our universities. These are some of the biggest, would he not accept, concerns facing the business community at the moment.
Murdo Fraser.
Well, we've debated these issues many times before in this chamber. I would say gently to the Minister, the United Kingdom has had record levels of inward migration over the last 5 years. Scotland has not been able to attract its population share of those new migrants, and that is an issue the Scottish Government could address. So to conclude, Presiding Officer, we all want to see greater levels of innovation and entrepreneurial activity in Scotland to make up for what is a pretty dismal historic record. But that will only happen with a change of direction from this Government, particularly in areas such as tax. So I want this Government to start listening to entrepreneurs like Sir Tom Hunter and start changing its direction. That's the point made in my amendment today, which I'm very pleased to move. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Fraser. I now call on Daniel Johnson to speak to and move Amendment 17785.2. Around 6 minutes, Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I begin by moving the amendment in my name. Indeed, the reception that I hosted last night on behalf of the CBI has already been referenced in debate. And actually, one of the key points I made there is that in order to deliver growth, we need to really very much have a shared agenda between business, the private sector and government and politics. And actually it's in everyone's interest, both in terms of driving the tax revenues that we need, but also delivering the public service that ultimately the businesses depend on as well. And actually critical to that is making sure that we have high growth, innovative companies, companies, not countries, apologies. Too much talk of Singapore. And that's why I welcome this debate. I think it is useful. And I thank the Government for bringing this forward, because I think it's useful to talk about the type of economy we need and the strategic issues we want. I've clearly already attracted an intervention from Michelle Thompson.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you very much for giving way. And obviously, we're talking a great deal about Sir Tom Hunter's report, but Oxford Economics, who did the research, also made clear that Singapore's success to a large extent rested on higher value manufacturing, such as electronics and precision engineering. So to that end, what kind of commentary does he have for the planned cut of immigration of engineers? Surely that's a worry.
Daniel Johnson.
It's quite a leap. Look, I think what we need is a coherent industrial strategy. And I have to say, it's a little bit disappointing earlier to hear the Deputy First Minister dodge the point about defence spending, for example, because ultimately we need coherence. The Strategic Defence Review has, I think, talking about engineers is just one component, and we need a balanced immigration policy. That is what the UK government has sought to set out in terms of attracting people with the skills we need. But we need a balance and coherence. That's what industrial strategy delivers. Can I make a little bit of progress? And I think that the one thing in order to have a debate like this is that we do need to actually have context and realism about where we currently sit. And it is welcome when we see success stories, and I would share the Deputy First Minister's congratulation and celebration of the success that we've had, but we do need to reflect not just the numbers that Ms Murdo-Fraser set out, but in terms of high-growth businesses, that yes, we've seen an increase in terms of the proportion of Scottish businesses that are high growth. That's up to 3.2% from 3%, but that we are 11th in terms of the UK nations and regions. If I could just make a touch of progress. Likewise, on business innovation rate has fallen from 50% to 32% in recent years. In terms of business-related research and development, we are in the third quartile of regions and nations in Scotland. As I've already pointed out in an intervention, a number of our patent applications has again been falling. So yes, we have success stories and we must celebrate them, but there is an awful lot more work to do. I'm happy to give way to the Deputy First Minister.
It was just on data, because it is really important that we measure the right thing. So one of the data points that Murdo-Fraser referred to is the TEA rate, and he said that Scotland is lagging. I mean, do you know what the top 3 countries are for the TEA rate? Ecuador, Guatemala and Chile. The TEA rate is irrelevant to high-growth enterprise. These are not hotbeds of high-growth enterprise. So I would encourage us to refer to figures that's actually going to be relevant to the discussion about entrepreneurship and what we're trying to achieve here. And the point that I made around RSM Consulting, illustrating that Scotland is the UK's fastest-growing territory for the incorporation of new tech businesses, is surely what we are trying to achieve.
Daniel Johnson, I'll give you the time back for both interventions.
Indeed, and I think I'll allow Mr Fraser to defend his numbers. I was just providing some other context, and I think, we should look at that, but it's just one measure that the Deputy First Minister was presenting there. All I'm asking for is a more holistic view. I would also think that we need to, and I very much look towards the Star report. I think it was a very useful and important one. But I'd also ask the Government to really question whether or not we're implementing every element as much as we could. And I think there are a number of areas where we could go further. I mean, not least of which, making sure that we're embedding the right skills within the education system, that we're delivering on computer science teachers. We've already touched upon the interfaces with higher education. Those are still issues, I think, for innovation, and it's good that the Deputy First Minister addressed that, but there are still too many barriers, not least of which that many higher education institutions are just simply taking too high an equity stake in the spin-outs when they do that, and indeed taking equity stakes of a type that simply get in the way of those companies going for Series A investment and so on. I think we also need to look at beyond technology startups. I think it was interesting that, again, we had a presentation from the Deputy First Minister. Absolutely, and it was right that we have a focus on technology start-up, but they're not the only type of start-up. And critically, when we look at other areas where we seek to develop high-growth businesses, they are more capital-intensive, whether that's advanced manufacturing, life sciences, food and drink, things where actually capital equipment and indeed plant are more expensive than technology firms, and the barriers between the different stages of the pipeline, as set out in the Stir report, are much higher. And I think we need a renewed focus on how we help those sorts of capital-intensive businesses to thrive. I would also, just in closing, like to point out that I think we also need to view, and I think the contrast the Deputy First Minister made between SMEs and high-growth start-ups is interesting, because there are two ways of looking at that. Absolutely, there's a lot of value in high-growth technology start-ups, but actually the other way of looking at those figures is actually we have an issue with the growth across the broad range of SMEs. And I would suggest this, that as well as looking at high-growth start-ups, we must look at ways that we can help all SMEs to grow, because as John Tsoukalis' report on Scotland's Productivity Challenge sets out, 90% of Scottish businesses have seen no growth over the last 2 decades. What we must do is develop approaches that help all businesses invest, all businesses grow, all businesses of all size reach their potential. And with that, I think I need to close. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call on Lorna Slater.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Across this chamber, we all agree that we want to have a dynamic and successful business community in Scotland. I'm not completely sure that the narrow focus on start-ups proposed by this motion is the whole story or a key solution. The entrepreneurial mantra of 10 years ago, move fast, break things, fail quickly, seems outdated now and wasteful of talent and resources. We should be looking at building for the long term and for everyone, not just for a few people who have a high appetite for risk and presumably enough financial security that they can afford to take the risk. The amendment that I had proposed to this debate motion today has 2 elements to it. The first agrees with the point in the Labour motion about supporting successful Scottish businesses to scale up. This is where there appears to be a gap in our economic planning. Half a dozen risky startups don't create the jobs or bring the investment of a company with a proven product or service, say of 25 people, scaling up to be a company of 50 or 100 people. Without support for scaling up, these startups, even if they survive, will stay small. I have had correspondence from the owner of a successful small business who feels stuck. They have a successful business model and would like to grow, but they're too small for the Scottish National Investment Bank to invest in, and they aren't in a key sector, so the enterprise agencies won't help. Where do they turn? What other options are available to them? We have many small businesses in Scotland who are successful, who are experts in their fields. They are working so hard to do what they do that they don't have time or resources to do the research and investment that's needed for them to grow. This is where our enterprise agencies and our National Investment Bank should be stepping in to provide advice and finance to grow, support local jobs, supply chains, and connect with the opportunities of a transition to a green economy. The second element of my amendment was around the nature of start-up businesses. The Committee for Economy and Fair Work heard the first evidence this morning on the Community Wealth Building Bill. The purpose of community wealth building is to ensure that more people have a stake in and a say on the economy, and that more people benefit from it. One of the ways to implement this is to support the creation of businesses such as cooperatives, social enterprises, and other democratic and employee-owned business models. We need more of our startups to be businesses that create community wealth, that workers and communities have a stake in and a say in. We need to be more supportive of employee buyouts. Business models matter. Witnesses in committee this morning gave evidence that Scotland's enterprise agencies and other economic development organisations need to pivot to support community wealth building, which means that they need to be providing the advice, direction, practical and financial support to these alternative business models, not just profit-led models. That may be that there is some upskilling and a change of direction for these agencies. The Scottish Government needs to give this clear direction to our enterprise agencies and to other economic development organisations. We heard at committee this morning that employee-led firms are 9% more productive. I'll take the intervention. I'll just finish my thought. 9% more productive than traditional firms. So this is key to improving productivity as well as ensuring wealth and benefits stay in Scotland and with working people. I'll take the intervention.
Thank you very much for taking the...
Ms Slater has 10 seconds left.
My apologies. I'll wrap up. Inclusive ownership is one of the 5 pillars of community wealth building that the Scottish Government has accepted. So let's think again about what a startup can be, who benefits, who is building for the long term, and who is creating wealth that stays in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Willie Rennie.
Implicit in the Deputy First Minister's contribution today was an acknowledgement, you could say an admission, that the government went off track for a number of years, that it was seen to be anti-business, that it had policies of never-ending apparent increases in taxation and regulation, a suspicion of business and entrepreneurship. Now, the change in rhetoric today is a helpful sign. It's moving in the right direction, but there is an implicit acknowledgement that things went off track along the lines that Lorna Slater has just outlined in her contribution, which I think contributed to that decline in investment, as we've seen in the housing sector, but also in many other sectors as well, where they've feared the ever-growing reach of the government and approach of the government. But nevertheless, it's a move in the right direction. I think also on top of that, an unstable political environment in those areas, but also in areas like Brexit, Liz Truss's budget, you could say, and the turbulence over the independence referendum, which I'm sure the Minister doesn't agree with on that point. But nevertheless, all of that turbulence adds to uncertainty in business, and it holds back decision-making and it holds back investment. And that's where we need to get to a much more pragmatic, stable relationship. Now, I have seen some good examples of progress. The improvement of the pipeline to support different businesses at different stages of their growth is a good development. Secondly, programmes that instil knowledge, understanding and confidence, like the Rural Leadership Programme through Scottish Enterprise and others, is a good example of being able to develop the political and personal capacity and skills within certain sectors. But there are still a number of challenges that we're facing. And I think universities is probably the biggest example of them all, which Stephen Kerr referred to earlier. You wouldn't know, but Edinburgh University, that's getting a lot of negative publicity just now, Edinburgh University in the year 23-24 created 127 new companies. They are major generators of economic growth in this country. We used to sing all the time about Dundee University's life sciences. That university still doesn't have a rescue package in place to make sure that that research capacity and, to be frank, brilliance continues. So we've got a number of problems that we need to address, and I'll certainly take an intervention.
Deputy First Minister.
Briefly, because I'm always in the business of restoring confidence in Dundee University, it's worth noting too that Dundee University was named the top university in the UK for entrepreneurial activity.
Willie Rennie.
So I hope that means by the end of the week we have an arrangement with Dundee University to secure its future, because we've been waiting for far too long. And then for a number of years we've had problems with business research and development. Now, Scotland always lagged behind the rest of the United Kingdom, and currently the UK figure is at 1.96%. In Scotland it's 1.45%, way down on where we should be. Now, that's an indicator of the confidence of businesses to invest in their own futures. And that's why we need to have a government that brings stability, makes sure that we invest in the right people and in the right skills. And that's where I have concerns about the tertiary education bill, in making sure that it tackles the real problems that we're facing in that sector. Because if we don't have the skills, if we don't have the people, if we don't have the institutions and the right attitude, then we're not going to be able to grow our entrepreneurial companies for the future. So I hope the government is listening, that it does understand that these challenges need to be addressed if we are to grow.
Thank you. We move to the open debate, and I call Emma Roddick to be followed by Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I welcome the opportunity to highlight some of what's going on in the Highlands and Islands, as well as our nation as a whole. Scotland is rich with talent, skills and the facilities needed to achieve our ambitious goal of becoming one of Europe's fastest-growing start-up economies, and this is particularly true in the diverse landscapes of the Highlands and Islands. Whenever I travel elsewhere, I am struck by how big business often easily overwhelms many town and city centres, and I see endless Greggs, Pretts, McDonald's and other big names. So I'm always so grateful to return home to Harry Gow's, Asher's, the Highland Way, 112, Island Larder, Bad Girl Bakery, Red Shank, and I could fill about 4 minutes just listing a few more. These are amazing local businesses run for the local area by locals, and they're full of heart as well as truly quality goods and services. But it's not a given that we'll keep them. We have to support them, and that means government as well as local shoppers. Which is why, despite limited powers and an annually challenging budget, the SNP keeps offering that support. Over 95% of non-domestic properties continue to benefit from a lower property tax rate in Scotland than elsewhere in the UK, with over 100,000 exempt entirely. And we're leading in innovation too. Beyond traditional sectors, the Highlands and Islands is embracing digital transformation. The Scotland 5G Centre opened an innovation hub in Inverness a couple of years ago, working with HIE to accelerate the deployment and adoption of 5G-enabled solutions. This includes pop-up networks to bring that 5G technology to geographically dispersed areas from Thurso all the way to Fort William. And we're very lucky, I think, to have all the benefits of a successful Highlands and Islands enterprise. I see its impact every day with many new and future work streams, as well as the outcomes of various opportunities that were taken over the last few decades with its support. The Northern Innovation Hub is a great example. Supported by the Inverness and Highlands City Region deal, it's now offered tailored support, funding, events and mentorship to over 2,500 organisations across the Highlands, including Pat Monroe, which got help with IT projects, and Kirsty Elizabeth Studios from Fort William and her start-up, which now features as a case study on HIE's website, showcasing what Highlanders can do with a little bit of support and a massive amount of entrepreneurial spirit. While the challenges that economies and communities face often feel more acute in my region, that does present us with the opportunity of finding solutions that don't only work for us, but can inspire the rest of the country and often the world. Unfortunately, it's not just geographical and industrial issues that face our businesses right now. There are political barriers too. Labour's decision to hit employers with a national insurance hike, reducing the ability of small businesses to contribute to our economy, forces them to choose between reducing the number of employees they have or paying those employees less than they otherwise might have. This does not make sense. And given how much the rise is costing the UK government itself, nobody has yet been able to explain who this rise is serving. Brexit and continued stubborn immigration policy not based on evidence or need at all is also holding us back. UK policy is out of step with what Scotland wants and needs. And it's so much harder now than it needs to be to recruit vital workers and attract students. Analysis estimates that Brexit trade barriers could impact Scotland's economy by £4 billion, with our exports potentially £3 billion lower compared to with continued EU membership. We have the talent, the skills and the natural resources to be a major player in emerging and growing industries, be it renewables, space or life sciences, and the Highlands and Islands knows how to be part of that. I don't want to see us miss out. What we need to ensure that we don't is continued partnership with the likes of HIE and UHI, alongside the full powers of an independent nation within the European Union.
Thank you. I call Alexander Stewart to be followed by Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to be able to contribute to this afternoon's debate. It's a welcome opportunity to highlight the importance of empowering Scotland's entrepreneurs and innovators. Innovation will be a key to Scotland's future, but it has also been a key to Scotland's past. After all, it was one of the main things that we are known for here in Scotland. Our spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation was pioneered through Scotland's Enlightenment, and Scotland has long been a cradle for growing ideas and progress. It is therefore not at all surprising that Scotland has countless innovations to name, and we have heard many of them today. The Government's motion is at least right to speak about the importance of Scotland becoming one of Europe's fastest-growing economies. I would also like to take the opportunity to congratulate Anna Stewart on being appointed Scotland's new Chief Entrepreneur. However, it is yet another motion presiding officer, where the government's rhetoric does not match their actions, as our amendment in the name of Murdo Fraser talks about. As these benches have raised many times before, the Scottish Government's approach to taxation is making it difficult for certain sectors to attract and retain top talent. This includes important sectors such as fintech, which have warned that the higher income tax is making it difficult for the sector to grow further. Economists have warned that it is an asking and is a risk of shrinking the Scottish tax base. Headhunting companies have also warned that their jobs have already been made much more difficult by the introduction of the advance rate of the Scottish income tax. Presiding officer, how is this situation supposed to help Scotland become one of Europe's fastest growing start-ups, if that is the case? And we're hearing that from many economists. Our amendment also speaks about the report published last month by the Hunter Foundation, which laid bare many of the problems Scotland's economy is facing. The report made it clear that Scotland needs a new growth strategy which will foster innovation in sectors of high potential. It was also clear that there is much more of a business-friendly environment required to make Scotland more attractive to inward investment. Any politician who has spoken to businesses across Scotland in the recent weeks and months and years will be well aware of this situation. The Fraser Island Institute found that only 9% of Scottish businesses believe this government understands their needs. 9%. Speaking about this, Sir Tom Hunter said that Scotland was facing a managed decline under the Scottish Government. A managed decline, presiding officer. However, it is contrast with Scotland is still, it could still retain global status if that is happen. And we have the opportunity to do that if we bring forward the right policies and tax policies to ensure that happens. And I would endorse that. Presiding officer, it is right that the Scottish Government should have an ambition for Scotland to become a leading innovator and have entrepreneurship. But their own record simply does not match that ambition. To take and make the vital vision that we need to have, Scotland needs a new approach based on common sense policies, including cutting tax. Tax is so important. There will also be the help of incentivising more of the world's bright talent to stay here in Scotland. We want to attract that talent here. We want it to flourish. We want businesses to happen. But they are being stopped by this government in the policies they bring forward. So in conclusion, the correct approach Scotland can be is a leading hub of innovation and entrepreneurship. That is what we wish to achieve. But the Scottish Government must play their part to make that dream become a reality, because it will only be a dream, presiding officer, if they do not achieve and they do not listen to individuals, organisations who are telling them that their policies and their tax policy are harming entrepreneurs and innovators. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Michelle Thompson to be followed by Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Entrepreneurship and innovation are central to driving economic growth. We could almost suggest that they're the twins of purposeful change in the economy, driving a culture of development and including productivity improvement. And all innovation involves what the late Professor Tom Burrs called the application of novelty, and all novelty involves some degree of risk. Innovation and entrepreneurship are social phenomena. They exist at their best in cultures that support change and risk-taking. And they don't thrive in risk-averse cultures. So I would contrast this with our activity as parliamentarians and government ministers. In the main, there's too much of a tendency to see each and every failure in policy making as bad and a matter to be condemned. It encourages risk aversion amongst policymakers. If all the initiatives we take to support innovation and entrepreneurship were never to lead to some failures, that in of itself would be a major failure.
Yes, absolutely. Rachel Hamilton.
Thompson for taking the intervention. It's not the policymakers or the opposition that are criticising the policies that are failing. It's the industry and the sector.
Michelle Thompson.
Simply not true. I listen every single week to baying from across this Parliament about multiple policies. Well, the point I am making is that we have to allow for some risk taking if we are going to drive innovation and entrepreneurship. And businesses themselves accept that. And I'm making that point to all of us, and I'm making that point to civil servants as well. There's a fundamental dichotomy at play here that will not lead us or serve us in the world going forward. Happy to take another intervention.
Stephen Kerr.
Doesn't Michelle Thompson agree that part of the problem is, as a parliament, we spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about social issues and very little actually discussing the issues we're discussing this afternoon? And even this afternoon, we've got a very short debate.
Michelle Thompson.
I completely agree. I think it's well known that I would spend most of every day talking about this kind of matter. I completely agree. We need a wealthy economy to support the kind of social changes and contribution we want to see. So, Thomas Watson, he probably put it better than me, founder and long-term chair of IBM, he said, if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. And so fundamentally, if we want to help drive innovation and entrepreneurship, we all have to understand that we need to increase our tolerance for risk. And that is even more important in today's world and the speed of change. Yes, absolutely.
Liz Smith.
With Michelle Thompson on this. But one of the most important things to assure that that can happen is that we are accountable for public money. And that is something that is critical in this Parliament. We have to have more accountability. Michelle Thompson and I sit on the Finance Committee. We're always asking for this. Would she agree that that would help if we increase the accountability for where public money is being spent and where it's being spent successfully?
Michelle Thompson.
I'm always in favour of oversight and accountability, but it's a separate point I'm making. One can have accountability and a clear line of sight for funding, but we also need to accept, specifically in the matter of entrepreneurship and innovation, we also need to increase our threshold for risk, and that will also include public sector funding, and also we want to crowd in more private finance as well, because I think they've got a more of a view about this. Now, I think, presiding officer, that leads me to the end of my remarks, but I've enjoyed the debate nevertheless. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I call Faisal Chowdhury to be followed by Marie McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It gives me a great honour speaking on today's debate as myself and my colleague Daniel Johnson from a business background and Colin Smith from economic. I'm a proud of Scotland's history of business and entrepreneurship. When I run businesses, I was lucky enough to meet many successful innovators and entrepreneurs who had an idea and worked hard to make it succeed. While the number of Scotland businesses innovating by introducing or developing a new product, service or processes has fallen from 50 to 22% in the last 10 years. Scotland is brimming with the potential to create a new generation of entrepreneurs in various sectors. Edinburgh has growing finance and technology sectors, employing tens of thousands of people and innovating in ways which can be applied across our economy. Taking advantage of these sectors and allowing talent to thrive is key if we want to remain competitive. The most recent data from Scottish Enterprise shows that government is the most frequent investor by deal count in Scotland. Keeping in mind how agencies like Scottish Enterprise and the Scottish National Investment Bank contribute to innovation and growth should be a priority. Currently, Scotland's investment and innovation system is complex and lack of focused economic strategy. We should be removing complexity for businesses and introducing a single point of contact across government for international investors. To make Scotland the most attractive part of the UK to operate in. Grant funding from these agencies should also be used more effectively to scale up businesses. Areas where innovation has a key role to play, like renewables and hydrogen, are forming an increasingly large part of our economy as we transition to net zero. If we cannot scale those up effectively, we will be left behind. The last point I want to discuss is skills. Developing a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship is a whole system issue, where government, businesses and education can all work together to deliver in the areas we have an advantage like tech. Every year, Scotland is creating around 13,000 digital skills jobs, but only producing 5,000 graduates to fill them. Government can be a bridge between business and education to deliver the graduate businesses need. This involves opportunity, tech skills in secondary and further education by increasing the number of computer science teachers. It involves increasing cooperation between our business schools to ensure graduates are ready for the modern economy. And it involves enabling workers re-skill. To conclude, Presiding Officer, Scotland has the talent to innovate in new and exciting ways which grows our economy. But we have to act to ensure that talent is channeled and supported to, so entrepreneurs and innovators can do what they do best. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Chowdhury. I now call Marie McNair to be followed by Stephen Kerr. 4 minutes, Ms McNair.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to speak in this debate in support of the Scottish Government's ambition to establish Scotland as one of Europe's fastest growing start-up economies. It's also an opportunity to highlight the fantastic entrepreneurial spirit in my constituency. Presiding Officer, Scotland is home to some of the world's brightest business minds, and we have a proud history of inventions, from television to telephone, penicillin to colour photographs. Looking ahead, the Scottish Government is committed to empowering entrepreneurs and innovators across our country. Presiding Officer, in my constituency of Clydebank and Mulgai, I am proud to have met some of our excellent entrepreneurs and innovators. As I only have 4 minutes, I can only mention a few. Presiding Officer, I know many of my colleagues might agree with me that caring for a plant can be often challenging. So I was really impressed when I met Clydebank's Happy Leaf, founded in 2022 by Amy Roberts and Ian Quinn. In 2023, they were awarded £10,000 at the Scottish Edge Award to develop a smart sensor that is placed in the soil of a plant, which sends messages to a phone app explaining what care the plant needs. And this is such a novel idea, and one that I'm sure many will make great use of. And last year, I also met with Mulgai's Andrew Flynn, co-founder of Potter. Potter was also successful in the Scottish Edge Award, securing a £100,000 investment to create what is believed to be the world's first self-watering origami plant pot. And since this time, they have achieved a life-changing deal to sell them in Japan and secured momentous deals to sell with Bloom and Wild, Uncommon Goods and John Lewis. Most recently, they secured a new partnership with Waterhaul, allowing them to meet increasing demand for their ocean pots, which are built from discarded fishing gear. And this is an incredible innovation with sustainability truly at its heart. Finally, Presiding Officer, I'd like to mention another constituent, Kim Burgess, who also won the Scottish Edge Award and secured £10,000 for a novel personal protection approach for anyone who may feel vulnerable in public. And this product comprises of a highly visible deterrent, and it's the potential revenue personal safety and ensure that the most vulnerable groups in society feel safe and confident. Having met Kim as well, I was so impressed by her invention and commend her entrepreneurial talent. There's such just a select few within my constituency, but I'm delighted by each and every one of the achievements, and there's so many more that I could mention today. To ensure we fully deliver we truly need meaningful support, it is vital that we continue to listen and learn from our entrepreneurs and the business community. And therefore, I'm proud that the Scottish Government has taken this approach and is committed to deliver a support network that nurtures talent and helps businesses to thrive. Presiding Officer, the SNP is acutely aware of the pressures facing businesses across the country and is taking decisive action to offer support despite limited powers and working with a challenging budget. Therefore, it's welcome that the Scottish Government will invest up to £34.7 million across entrepreneurship, innovation and social enterprise in 2025-26, and that's an increase of 50% on the 24-25 budget. Meanwhile, the UK Labour Government is betraying Scotland's businesses with their tax on jobs and broken promises on energy bills. Presiding Officer, on the world stage, there can be no better investment than investment in the Scottish innovation. We have a talent, skills and resources to be a major player, but we're constantly hampered by successive UK governments. What Scotland needs is the full powers of an independent nation within the European Union to allow us to fully flourish, and we need it really now. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Stephen Kerr to be followed by Ben McPherson. Around 4 minutes, Mr Kerr.
I think this is a very useful debate, and I'd like Willie Rennie's not in his place, but I'd like to believe that what we hear from the Deputy First Minister is a change of tone from the SNP government. I'm not entirely convinced, and I'm not convinced because it would require a change of policy, as Craig Hoy's saying from his seat. And I don't know if the SNP have got it in them to have a change of policy. And I'll give you an example, and it's the one we discussed yesterday, which frankly I maybe got over-emotional about in dealing with Minister Lockhead, and that is the failure of this government to be coherent in any sense in relation to the Rolls-Royce project that Scottish Enterprise vetoed. And that's an example of where I think the Scottish Government's rhetoric from Kate Forbes, who I think she knows I like her a great deal, but when I listen to her, she sounds very credible, but when you look behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, what you discover is it's the same old SNP with the same old negative anti-business rhetoric. I really enjoy Michelle Thompson, I think she knows that as well, and she's not representative, unfortunately, of the vast swathe of SNP MSPs, who are fundamentally hostile to the whole idea of wealth creation through enterprise and entrepreneurship. And so let me just comment on what Michelle Thompson did say, because she said some really important things, a very, very good speech. And she talked about risk, and I would like to marry that up with the complete equation, because it's about risk and reward. Yep. So people will take risks if they can see there's a chance that that risk will pay off in terms of reward. But what we've created in Scotland is an anti-reward culture. If you do really well in Scotland, you probably don't even stay in Scotland, and that is heartbreaking. And I think the SNP have got to ask themselves in government why it is, as was pointed out to them, that we've had this massive number, probably far too big a number, no, not probably, actually, far too big a number in terms of net migration into this country, and hardly any people, in proportional terms, come to Scotland. We've got to ask ourselves what it is that we have done in our country that puts people off from coming here and making a future here, even if you agree with having mass migration, which I don't. I give way.
Ben McPherson.
For taking the intervention. Year after year we see net migration to Scotland, and actually the figures for coming to Scotland are pretty similar to the north of England. So I do think it's unfair to characterise the Scottish migration position in the way that he has. But also, given that immigration policy is reserved, surely the policies of the Home Office play a role in the problem that he's identified.
Oh, the problem in the Home Office is there's been too much immigration, and one of the frustrations is, you see, I'm not a member of the Parliament for the North East of England, so I'm not particularly bothered about the North East of England. If I'm being completely frank about it, I'm partial towards Scotland, and I would look at what's happening in Scotland, and I think we have to take the lessons that are on offer from our actual experience of what's happened in recent years. And I want to mention also what Faisal Chowdhury talked about, because we can talk about migration. I know the Greens love to talk about mass migration, and other SNP MSPs do too. But what we should be talking about is our broken education system. I mean, we have got people in this country who are sitting doing nothing, or, and this is a bigger crime in many respects, massively underemployed, because we haven't got the skills economy correct. The SNP reached to cut these things. If you want an enterprise economy, if you want a growing economy, you don't cut budgets that relate to building education and skills. What you do, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about, you can dress it up in any kind of fancy language you like, we're talking about our people. We're talking about our people and their get up and go and their ideas and their energies and their creativity. And no country in the world is second to Scotland when it comes to our people. But This SNP government has reached to cut those vital skills and education programmes every time they can. And so what he had to say was absolutely right. I've run out of time, but I am grateful for the opportunity to have spoken. I hope Kate Forbes can lead the resistance within the SNP government to restore capitalism and enterprise to the vocabulary of government in this country.
Thank you. I now call the final speaker in the open debate, Ben McPherson, around 4 minutes. Mr McPherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And this is an important debate, and it's not enough time to really discuss all the different ways in which a culture of creation and a mindset of entrepreneurship is thriving in Scotland, but what we could do to continue to enhance that. How do we create an environment for sustainable growth to an even greater extent? How do we make our country an even better place to be in terms of living and doing business? But I think, as it's been touched on, Scotland has the talent, the skills and the facilities to be one of Europe's fastest growing start-up economies, and starts from a position of strength. And while I do think it's interesting, as others have highlighted, to look at the models of other nations, I think we do need to consider that in the context of we are a devolved nation, and Ireland and Singapore, for example, are very different circumstances with different constitutional arrangements, and that's just a fact. What is also a fact, and this was touched on by Willie Rennie, is the importance of Edinburgh to Scotland's economy, and including the university here. And of course, as an Edinburgh MSP, that is of particular attention to me. If you think about Leith, of course, a lot has been said, rightly, recently about the massive renewable hub growth that is happening in the port, the opportunities that are there, the innovation that's happening, and the diversity of that economy, and how that has real potential to grow in terms of reindustrialisation. The creative industries, film and TV production, as well as other aspects of that part of the economy, thrive in my constituency, and there's really interesting capacity for growth as well. The Cabinet Secretary mentioned, in terms of tech and computer games, Build a Rocket Boy, based in Leith, Skyscanner years ago, started in Leith. And I do think that my constituency highlights two main focuses of where we need to apply our attention, in my view, and these have also been highlighted by others, and that's both skills and people and place. And in terms of place, the reason that so many people are basing businesses and themselves in Edinburgh and in my constituency is because of the quality of life here. And a lot of that is to do with affordability, and that is where, for example, the housing situation that we face is so important. People have been establishing businesses and creating businesses in our capital city because it has been more affordable and has a high quality of life and services comparatively with elsewhere. And that's why we need to think about issues like what diversity there is in our housing market, and issues like LBTT, with particular consideration to Edinburgh and its crisis. And I know that some champion build to rent, and it does have a role in our housing market, absolutely, but it's a model for transient workers. What we also need to think about is how do we build the capacity for those to stay longer term. So it's not the panacea to the housing crisis, build to rent, but it does play a part. In terms of enjoyment, I will just finish by talking about the hospitality sector. The challenges for the hospitality sector have been articulated in this chamber in a number of different ways. But I would say in Edinburgh, while there is huge demand for hospitality businesses, the costs can be higher because of the property values. And I would just say that we can't take the Scottish hospitality sector in our capital city for granted. For example, the Shore in Leith, it's thriving, but also that has a vulnerability about it because of the challenges of the national insurance hike and the general economic conditions. So people come here to start businesses, to live well and to enjoy themselves, and that's a great place to build from.
Thank you, Mr McPherson. We now move to the closing speeches. I call first Lorna Slater, around 4 minutes. Ms Slater.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'd actually like to invite, if she's willing, Michelle Thompson to make the intervention that she was unable to make in my opening remarks.
Michelle Thompson.
That's very kind of you. I really appreciate it. I was simply going to point out that Lorna Slater was referencing the Economy Committee meeting this morning. In terms of that kind of shift, what they were really talking about was the main scale lenders making that shift. And that's really important for us to bear in mind over what we're able to influence in this Parliament. I think the reference was drawn from the United States, but this kind of large corporate lending. So it was just a clarification.
Lorna Slater.
Thank you very much, Michelle Thompson, for that intervention. Actually, it was the conversation in committee about the Community Wealth Building Bill itself and how the provisions of the bill as it's currently drafted are about putting an onus on public sector bodies like our enterprise agencies and for them to pivot. And we've talked previously, both in this chamber and in Economy Committee, about mainstreaming alternative business models. So I think what the member says is also true. We maybe were just identifying different parts of that committee conversation this morning. One of the things I'd like to do in my closing remarks is challenge some of the economic orthodoxy that we've, or what passes for economic orthodoxy that we've heard in the chamber this afternoon. The idea that everybody moves around the world for tax advantages only, and that everybody only wants money, and that's their primary goal. I have the advantage of many of the members across the chamber who were claiming this, of having moved to Scotland specifically to bring my skills as an engineer here and to be part of Scotland. Not because I thought it would make me more money, but because the lifestyle that we have, that we enjoy in Scotland, of a social democratic country, of being a small nation with big connections, is so powerful. Certainly.
Briefly, Rachel Hamilton.
Has the member heard of a description called tax flight? And that is happening in Scotland right now. Members of the business community, successful business people, are leaving because of the tax regime by the SNP.
Lorna Slater.
I have great difficulty in understanding why that evidence, the member brings that evidence, because even someone earning over £100,000 in Scotland is paying a fraction of that more in income tax. Whereas in Scotland, we have free university tuition, we have baby boxes, we have free prescription, we have cheaper house prices than in many parts of the UK. The overall cost of living in Scotland is lower, and any business person who can't do that maths strikes me as being not very credible as a business person. It's a very good deal to live in Scotland. If you look at all the advantages you get, everything from free social care to free bus passes for your kids, it adds up to a significant sum of social benefit.
Ms Slater, can I ask you to resume your seat? The member has taken 2 interventions, has been generous with her interventions. I think we should then listen to the responses and the speech that she is making. Lorna Slater, please resume.
And it isn't just me that thinks that tax, everybody's only worried about tax. When the World Bank did investor surveys on what determined their willingness to invest in a country, the top reasons were almost always the same. I'm quoting from the Financial Times here. First came macroeconomic and political stability, which has been put in jeopardy in the UK because of Brexit. High-quality infrastructure and skills. Low taxes and enterprise zones are at the bottom of the list, always near the bottom, says the Financial Times. The key to growth is to create an environment where there are great commercial opportunities. Tax rate differences of a few percentage points are largely unimportant if you're making a lot of money. A better policy response would be to use any remaining fiscal space to invest in a serious productivity agenda, and that includes mechanisms for increasing investment in infrastructure, skills, research and innovation, alongside incentives for firms to adopt new technology or improve management practices. Which brings me on to my second point, which is to challenge Willie Rennie on his points around regulation. Regulation can support businesses. I was speaking to someone who works in the construction sector, and he was saying how the lack of regulation in heat and buildings, the lack of commitment from the Scottish Government as to targets, as to the number of heat pumps to be installed, have stalled investment in that business. Setting a clear direction in regulation for investment allows companies to put the money into training and equipment. The Financial Times has also something to say on EU regulation, which compares companies in the EU which are subject to much higher regulation than the UK. And they've noted that EU regulations, while often seen as burdensome, have also driven innovation by compelling businesses to adapt and modernise. It could be argued that a lack of constraints in the UK through regulation has allowed UK businesses to rest on their laurels and not to make the innovation and investment and modernisation that they need to compete. And I'll wrap up there because I'm out of time. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Slater. I now call on Colin Smith, around 6 minutes. Mr Smith.
Presiding Officer, Scotland has a proud history of invention and innovation, from the telephone to the television, from the pneumatic tyre to penicillin. That legacy lives on today in the entrepreneurs and innovators across our country who are working hard to build businesses, to generate ideas and create the jobs in every community. But if we're serious about empowering those entrepreneurs, not just celebrating them, we need more than press releases or appointments. We need a plan that delivers. So while I welcome Anna Stewart's appointment as Chief Entrepreneur and thank Matt Logan for his valuable work, the motion before us today paints a picture that simply doesn't reflect the reality experienced by many of our businesses. As Daniel Johnson rightly highlighted, the number of innovation-active businesses in Scotland has fallen from 50% to just 32%, putting us behind every English region in Wales. Despite a small improvement in high-growth firms, Scotland ranks 11th out of 12 UK regions on the government's own innovation scorecard. Other key indicators are going in the wrong direction. Business R&D investment is low, patent grants have dropped sharply, and academic income from business collaboration has fallen in real terms. Presiding Officer, entrepreneurs don't need another ambition from government. They need practical support. They need the investment to scale, the capital to grow, the skills pipeline that meets their needs. But on all three fronts, the government is falling short. And let's be clear, this isn't just about tech start-ups in our cities. Innovation must be inclusive. It must reach rural communities, social enterprises and sectors that have often been overlooked. That includes supporting more women and minority entrepreneurs, something Anna Stewart has rightly championed through the Pathways work she co-authored. But good ideas need more than good intentions. They need funding, access and they need consistent support. On investment, the number of risk capital deals under £10 million fell last year. Larger deals collapsed, with the total value down by 69%. There's a chronic lack of long-term capital, particularly for capital-intensive sectors like manufacturing and life sciences. And on skills, we face a growing digital gap. As Faisal Chowdhury rightly said, we're creating far more digital jobs than we're producing qualified graduates. The number of computer science teachers has fallen, and employers are struggling to recruit people with even basic IT skills. And when it comes to in-work training, which is critical for both new entrants and workers looking to reskill or upskill, many businesses recently told the Economy and Fair Work Committee they are deeply concerned about the funding mechanism changes being proposed by the Scottish Government in their planned tertiary education and training bill. There's a real risk of fear that these changes will undermine the ability of training providers to meet the needs of businesses, just so the government can shore up their bad decision to cut college funding by 17% since 2021, rather than simply better fund our colleges. Our colleges are facing growing demand, long waiting lists for skill shortage subjects and falling apprenticeship numbers, all while being asked to do more with less. And this government is doing the same with our enterprise agencies. South of Scotland Enterprise had its budget slashed by over 25%, £8.7 million gone from the organisation responsible for supporting SMEs, fostering innovation and creating jobs. Now, SOCI continued to deliver, from the tech scaler hub in Dumfries to innovative sustainable manufacturing businesses such as the Eco Group in Annan, but ambition needs to be backed by resources. Presiding Officer, the Government claims it wants to build a world-class entrepreneurial culture as a central goal in the National Strategy for Economic Transformation. But 2 years on, Audit Scotland has rightly questioned the lack of clear investment plans and weak transparency in how NSET is being delivered. The most recent progress report offers generalised updates, but little clarity on what's working, what's not, or why. We can't afford another strategy that continues to overpromise and under-deliver. We need a different approach, one where our enterprise agencies pivot, as Lorna Slater said, and are empowered to provide long-term strategic support for entrepreneurship, where colleges are properly funded to deliver the skills businesses need, where in-work training and digital education are seen as national priorities, and where the Scottish Government uses influence to bring together industry, academia and communities to drive innovation and share its rewards. That's why Labour are asking Parliament today to support our amendment, because while early stage support matters, it's scale-up skills and sustained investment that will deliver lasting impact. Presiding Officer, Scotland does have the talent. We have the ideas, but unless we match ambition with action, unless we get the basics right, then innovation will remain concentrated in too few sectors and in too few places. Let's deliver a truly inclusive entrepreneurial Scotland where innovation thrives in every community, rural and urban, and where those who drive our economy forward are backed every single step of the way in that important journey.
Thank you, Mr Smith. And I call on Craig Hoy, around 7 minutes. Mr Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I want to thank my colleagues across the Chamber for the contributions to this debate, which I think is genuinely an important one for Scotland, because without entrepreneurs willing to invest and take risks in Scotland, then Scotland will not be able to succeed. And the bill for the social contract that Lorna Slater mentioned will go unpaid. But I believe that under the SNP we are missing opportunities to deliver a culture that would allow entrepreneurship to flourish. Because too often I think it is clear that Scotland plc isn't actually open for business. The entrepreneurs and the risk takers and the wealth creators go where the opportunities exist. And to deliver this government must seriously rethink the way they think and start to think as business thinks. And I think the contribution from Lorna Slater revealed that there is a gulf in relation to that between some of the parties in this chamber and those who would and could set up businesses in Scotland if the operating environment was different. And I think we need to make sure we create the culture and the atmosphere here in Scotland that will allow those businesses to grow. And that means bringing, as has been said in the course of this debate, higher education institutions with us and make sure that they are well funded, global and entrepreneurial in their outlook. And to respond to the Deputy First Minister, it is no point as having the best R&D in Scotland's universities if those universities can barely afford to turn the lights on. Now, like many across this chamber, I've read the recommendations from the Hunter Foundation, Lessons from Singapore, and I found those recommendations incredibly useful. The point it makes about Scotland are very true, like, for example, that in Singapore, workers are almost doubly productive when compared to their Scottish counterparts. And this and many of the points that were made by Sir Tom Hunter should be lessons that the SNP learns and does so quickly. Otherwise, Scotland will continue to fall behind our international competitors. And the worrying trend that we're seeing in terms of business registrations and business failures will continue here in Scotland, particularly around those SMEs that should be the engine for growth now and into the future. And we need to address what I think is generally perceived to be a hostile tax environment, that this government isn't pro-business, pro-development or pro-investment. And also we need to make sure we target those sectors that can potentially grow. I will briefly give way to Michelle Thompson.
Michelle Thompson.
I can, but I have to make the point, yes, tax is a consideration, but if you're talking about creating an entrepreneurial culture, you have to factor in the economic system as well. And given that so many key powers lie with Westminster, monetary policy, control of interest rates, money supply, corporation tax, employment law, migration, energy strategy, pensions, export support and so on, surely that factors into it as well.
Craig Hoy.
More of a lecture than an intervention, but I think it is pitifully the case that 9% of Scottish businesses think that this SNP government understands the business environment. That is the reality of the situation. Now, Deputy Presiding Officer, the mood music and the operating environment are critical to attracting entrepreneurs and investment, and this was something that I had first-hand experience of, because after nearly a decade of running a publishing and conference business in London, at the age of 33, I took a mortgage out on my own house and flew out to Hong Kong with £50,000 to establish my own communications and conference business. The first stop was Hong Kong, which, like Singapore back in 2008, has changed a bit since then, was avowedly international, low tax and pro-business. I recall the company formation process. It was very, very simple and very easy even for a resident. And through the grapevine, it was most likely the grapevine in the Foreign Correspondents Club, the the chief executive of Invest Hong Kong, an avuncular Brit called Mike Rouse called me in to welcome what he thought was another large-scale British investor to the city. He even maintained an interest in my venture when he found out the 50 I was referring to was thousands and not millions. But as Mike said, from small acorns grow mighty oaks. And it is often those smaller start-ups that are the ones that need the greatest levels of support. And Mike's message then was very simple, and it can be articulated as this: welcome to Hong Kong. Invest in Hong Kong. Tax is low, regulation is light touch. There were incentives to invest, for example, a tax holiday for SMEs in their first 5 years. So if you made a profit, you didn't pay tax up to a certain level. There was a two-tier profits tax, today just 8.25% for the first £200,000 in profits. There were double taxation treaties in place to make sure that entrepreneurs and their companies could not be taxed potentially twice. There was no VAT, and there was attractive tax deductions for capital expenditure. There was a low income tax rate and no income tax for earnings that were generated overseas. These were all concrete measures that encouraged me to set up a business there. And there was support from Invest Hong Kong for businesses big and small. Now, after growing that business in Hong Kong, I set up a similar business in Singapore. And again, the message was quite clear. Singapore was open for business, and when you walked in through the door, they were there to help you. There was perhaps a slightly more draconian set of rules to abide by in a very Singaporean way, but once you understood the nature of the legal system in Singapore, it was easy to navigate, and again, taxation was low. Now, I welcome in the Scottish Government's programme for government that they're looking to establish an organisation called Invest Scotland, which it says will be a one-stop shop for investors looking to come to Scotland. But providing the mechanism to bring people here won't cut it if entrepreneurs and investors get to Scotland and realise that our taxes are too high, our skills base isn't fit for purpose, and our infrastructure and planning system will hold them back, notwithstanding, and I do believe this has been an issue, the constitutional uncertainty that has been created by the SNP's ongoing obsession with independence. Now, in the most recent Scottish Government budget, we advocated for tax cuts for individuals and businesses, and we also advocate for a cull of the quangos that are producing the red tape that are holding many businesses back. I think there is also a recognition that this government needs to do more to make sure that we have the right skills, and that's properly funding our colleges, our universities and our apprenticeship schemes. And the Scottish Government must make this an absolute priority. Otherwise, there will be massive skills gaps that will prevent people locating their businesses here and growing their businesses here. The Scottish Government, I think, has not thought seriously about the business environment in this country. It has not thought seriously about the international lessons it can learn from countries, for example, as Tom Hunter said, in Singapore and other Asian nations, but also in nations closer to home. There is a common sense solution to the fact that the SNP are failing to create the space and the environment in which Scottish entrepreneurs and those who we might want to attract here to set up businesses. But there is a template for the government to be able to do it, and I would urge them to do so quickly.
Thank you, Mr Hoy. I now call on the Deputy First Minister to wind up the debate around 9 minutes. Deputy First Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, one of the vital characteristics of an entrepreneur is a healthy dose of optimism, positivity and enthusiasm, which was heard in some speeches and less so in other speeches. So I feel with all the debates we're now having on the economy, it can only get better with that sense of rejecting the doom and gloom and pursuing growth, prosperity and positivity. Because we do need to engage with the substance of these issues. You know, if in terms of the specific, perhaps if I make some progress, in terms of understanding the headwinds in the Scottish economy, the challenges that businesses are grappling with, we do need to rise beyond the Google bad stat on generic economic matters in Scotland and actually get into the substance of the issues. And today we are discussing the role of entrepreneurship in particular and how we support Scotland's entrepreneurs for all the reasons that we have debated in our speeches so far. One of the points that has frequently struck me is that if you measure the wrong thing, you'll deliver the wrong outcome. And when it comes to entrepreneurship, we've heard a range of statistics from a number of speakers today, and it's very clear that what we measure and what we invest in will deliver the result that we want. In other words, if we just measure the statistics that Murdo Fraser was criticising in terms of total early-stage entrepreneurial activity, you might start to replicate Ecuador, Guatemala and Chile. There's a role for looking at that. The same goes for some of the statistics that Daniel Johnson talked about. He talked about the fact that deals over £10 million had fallen between 2022 and 2023. Yes, but 2022 figures were boosted by a small number of huge deals like Go Fibre, which was £164 million. In 2024, the latest data, there were 17 deals over £10 million, totalling £373 million. That's a 90% increase in deal volume and a 70% increase in value. In other words, Scotland is growing, and I am more than delighted for the credit to entirely go to Scotland's businesses. I am here to celebrate what they have achieved in the last few years, because the evidence is clear that the policies that have been implemented and the investment that has been made during this Parliament are starting to turn the tide, and we are seeing a significant increase in investment across the board. And even if we get beyond the figures, and then I will take some interventions, even if we get beyond the figures, look at the examples that we are seeing of companies with high growth potential. Torix in Aberdeen, developing novel Alzheimer's treatment, has been valued at over $1 billion. That's a great example of a business that delivers economic value, but is also providing a solution to a problem, Alzheimer's, that many people have sadly experienced. But I will happily take any interventions.
Liz Smith.
Can I thank Kate Forbes for taking the intervention? And it's incumbent upon all of us to celebrate these successes. But when it comes to statistics, does she recognise that when it comes to those that are published by Mark Diffley and his organisation, there are very serious concerns amongst the business community about some aspects of what they see as a rather threatening environment within Scotland?
Deputy First Minister.
So can I absolutely accept that there are issues that the business community raised with me and raised with all of us, I imagine. But we fall into the trap frequently in this Parliament about talking about business as though it's homogenous, talking about economic growth and prosperity as if it is a linear line to deliver. And I think there is a role for all of us to have generic economic discussions in this debate. But what I was keen to do, and it's not my prerogative to do that, in this debate was to hone in on one element, a subset, shall we say, of the economy, and talk about those high growth potential entrepreneurs that we want to develop. We know, I talked about Sweden, we want to see more unicorns. Let's be unashamed about that. We want to see more unicorns. We want to see more high growth businesses that go all the way from being a small start-up to hitting the heady heights of being a unicorn. And that will be a different journey for them than it might be for a retailer on Edinburgh's High Street, or a different experience for some of the other businesses that we all represent. And I think understanding how we do that is really important. We've talked a bit about universities, and Daniel Johnson made the point that universities take too high an equity stake in spin-outs. Now, I agree that has been a barrier in the past, but one of the interesting outcomes of the renewed focus in the last few years on entrepreneurship and the policies that we've been progressing is that the average equity taken by universities in 2024 was falling, down 11.8% from 14.1% in 2023, and the lowest since records began in 2011. In other words, universities are actively changing their policies on equity, with Edinburgh and Aberdeen leading the way, and we commend that. But if we hadn't had the discussion maybe 3-4 years ago about what needed to change in terms of that really focused approach, we might not have seen that change. Scotland has a successful track record around university spin-outs. In 23-24, the number of active firms which spun off from Scottish higher education institutions increased by 9% compared to 2022-23. That's an impressive figure, 9%. But let's go back to 2016-2017. It was a 56% increase. So we are moving in the right direction, and I think that is to be commended. The other area where a number of people had a debate and a discussion is around tax. Now, there are clearly dividing lines within this Parliament on tax rates and on tax position. But we have to grapple with the fact that some of the top performers for entrepreneurship in Europe are Denmark, Sweden and Norway. They are high tax systems with a strong social contract, and IPPR Scotland recently laid out that approach. In other words, even if you want to see low tax and you think that that will deliver a result, as Lorna Slater said, it's a lot more than just tax rates that develops and delivers that successful ecosystem, because low tax does not inevitably mean world-class ecosystems, and we have to do some of the heavy lifting on that. So as I draw to a close, I will actually bring in Craig Hoy, considering his self-professed entrepreneurship experience.
I thank the Minister for giving way, but doesn't she realise that the problem is that if business believe they were going to get good quality public services and a good quality infrastructure, they may actually think about investing in Scotland, despite the SNP's high taxes. Isn't the problem in Scotland is we've got high tax but poor quality public services?
Well, to use Craig Hoy's argument, that suggests to me that the fact that we for 9 years have now been the top destination outside London and the South East for foreign direct investment indicates to me that they like what they see in Scotland and they are choosing to invest. So, to reiterate the steps that we are taking in Scotland, because if we've learned anything from the work we've been doing on entrepreneurship, is that the interventions that we take have got to be flexible, they've got to work with entrepreneurs, and lastly, as Michelle Thompson said, we have to take a less risk-averse approach to some of those investments, because by definition, some of this is, in terms of high growth, is going to be of higher risk. So I set out. Yes, I will.
Stephen Kerr.
Again, the Deputy First Minister is dealing with these things without reference to some very basic foundations. For example, I don't think she's mentioned the word school. I don't think she's mentioned the word college. Now, these are areas where the SNP clearly has failed Scotland, particularly in this parliamentary session, yet she's setting that aside. It always begins with our people. Why will she not address the issues surrounding our people and the imbuing of enterprise and the entrepreneurial spirit that needs to start at a very early age?
Deputy First Minister.
Our people are core to the work that Mark Logan set out, the Scottish Technology Review, and our people and education is vital. In my opening remarks, I definitely made quite a lot of mention of education. So let me go through, and he'll hear the word education again shortly. Let me go through the 5 steps that we're taking at the moment that is developing the best ecosystem for startups. Launching the Ecosystem Fund, which was always designed to be flexible, to allow entrepreneurs to access sometimes just a little bit of funding to help them on to the next step. Secondly, backing the really successful schemes like Scottish Edge, which much mention has been of Sir Tom Hunter. That identifies and supports promising new businesses. Third, making sure that the Entrepreneurial Education Fund, which for the first time this year provided entrepreneurial education throughout primary and high school, we're relaunching the Competitive Entrepreneurial Education Fund, which was so highly successful last year, and does mean that entrepreneurship is not just the domain of rare individuals with exceptional intelligence or drive. It's a democratic approach. I'm being told to round up. And the last one is supporting new computing science teachers with that substantial investment for the 2-year pilot at Aberdeen University to train new computing science teachers who do educate within high schools. And that means that our young people are accessing some of the best education they can to have a bright entrepreneurial future. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on empowering entrepreneurs and innovators. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of Business Motion 17801 in the name of Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau setting out a business programme, and I call on Jamie Hepburn to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that motion 17801 be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. The motion is therefore agreed. The next item of business is consideration of two Parliamentary Bureau motions, and I ask Jamie Hepburn on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau to move motions 17802 on approval of an SSI and 17803 on committee meeting times.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on these motions will be put at decision time, and there are 4 questions to be put as a result of today's business. The first question is that Amendment 17785.3 in the name of Murdo Fraser, which seeks to amend motion 17785 in the name of Kate Forbes on empowering entrepreneurs and innovators, be agreed. Are we all agreed? No. The Parliament is not agreed. Therefore, we'll move to a vote, and there will be a short suspension to allow members to access digital voting.